After the hell that it was to assemble this model, I primed it with the first primer I saw, not worrying about the color as I intended to cover it entirely in metallics. The first of which was Vallejo's Chrome, which sprays easily and covers well. However, it doesn't have that mirrored finish Molotow's liquid chrome has, so I applied that after to really get a reflective surface. You have to put this stuff on pretty fast and heavy in order for it to settle into a mirrored finish, and getting some overspray on an already mirrored surface will fog it, making it a little difficult to use on larger surfaces like this tank. Now, this tank can be outfitted with twin heavy bolters or twin heavy flamers, and I wanted the freedom of choosing which as needed between games, so I decided to magnetize them. To do so, I drill a small pilot hole just to the left of the top right corner rivet in the box design thing, and then with the 15th by 64th drill bit, I slowly drill through. The smaller pilot hole will keep the larger drill bit from sliding into the rivet just beside it. Then I can add a little super glue and shove in a 6mm by 2mm neodymium magnet. Just be sure you shove this magnet in quickly, as you don't want to get the glue to harden before the magnet is fully seated and flush with the side of the tank. We'll come back to magnetizing the sponsons later, but for now I move to violet ink to add some shadows. I start by spraying this from an anti-zenithal position, and add it along recesses and corners for more shadows. This is where one of my first issues began, as I went too heavy-handed with it. Unfortunately, in order to have this tank ready for the local GW store's Tanksgiving event, I went hard and fast, knowing full well that the high humidity, fluctuating somewhere between 65 and 75%, was going to come back and bite me in the ass. And that it did. The humidity, my overly heavy spraying of violet, and the glossy smooth finish of the now chrome panels resulted in some terrible beading of the violet ink, which stained noticeably. I probably should have fixed this with additional chrome passes, but I decided to move forward and to try to keep my timeline. With Tamiya Smoke, a transparent black model paint, I thin this down with the Tamiya's thinner at roughly a 3:2 ratio and spray everything. When I say it's transparent, that is kind of misleading. It's extremely transparent. I ended up going through 3 full 10ml bottles, and honestly, I should have probably used 4. It took roughly 20 coats to go through all of this. And once I got to this point, a lot of the ugly purple, though still visible, was drastically toned down. This stuff is alcohol based and is extremely sticky, so to keep the airbrush flowing, I ran cleaner through it and the nozzle every 3rd or 4th application. I then move on to applying Tamiya's clear coat next, giving 2 or 3 passes to help protect the black tinted chrome finish. I decided to go with this color scheme, which will ultimately be black on black, as that's the colors of the Lucifer blacks, a branch of the astramilitarum. The other shade of black will be matte to help tone down all the glossiness just a little, but for now, let's finish up magnetizing the sponsons. I mixed a wad of green stuff before roughing up where I will be gluing it on the inside of the sponson, opposite of where the guns sit. Doing so will allow the superglue to adhere better, and while the glue is still wet, I press in the ball of green stuff. And this is important. I pull a magnet and double check the polarity to ensure I have it oriented correctly, before I apply a drop of superglue onto the green stuff and push the magnet into it. I also use my fingers to shape the green stuff, pulling it around the sides of the magnet to better secure it. Then with a flat object, I just use my sanding stick here, I make sure the magnet and green stuff is flush with the side walls. I needed to readjust mine, so I carefully push it to one side and again check to make sure it's flush. How do you know if it's positioned right? You might be asking. Easy, the magnet should be centered between these 2 rivets. That will ensure it lines up perfectly with the one that I drilled into the side of the tank earlier. I move on to base coating all of the matte black areas next. The base coat took far longer than any of the highlights on these spots. The first highlight was applied as dry brushing onto the treads and eagles, but for the most part it was edge highlights, hatching lines, and volumetric highlights on the cylindrical shapes. The second highlight is exactly the same, though with thinner lines and covering less area than the previous highlights. I expected these steps would be relatively quick, and I guess maybe they were compared to what's coming, but no, it was not quick, taking roughly 5.5 hours. That realization was a little heartbreaking, knowing that the next step was going to border on the nightmarish. The previous airbrushing, assembly, and mold line cleanup, gap filling, and magnetizing steps all took roughly 7 hours. With the bright silver ink, I do a rough edge highlight on pretty much every edge surface on this damn thing, sans the matte black areas. See all those rivets? Yeah, I dotted every one of them as well, because who needs to sleep? After that was all done, I came back with some black to dot in some deeper pitting in the silver spots that I got a little too messy with, as well as added a couple of black scratches here and there. These black scratches and the silver scratches ate up more than 10 hours of work alone. Next, I mixed together multi-black and solvent from Mr. Hobby to add as a pen wash. Now usually I love this product. It's generally fast and easy to apply, and it's equally as fast and easy to remove where needed. I did not really enjoy adding this to the tank, as there were so many crevices and edges for it. And yes, my obsessive compulsive ass added this around every single rivet. I actually did my best to purposely not get it around any of the rivets, as I didn't want to do this at all. But then I accidentally got it around one rivet, and yeah, it looked much better with it, so I bit my tongue, screamed to the heavens, and resigned myself to apply it. Now, the night before the Thanksgiving event, and with a ways to go yet, I power on, finishing up the lights next. I originally intended to paint them much like I do rounded gemstones, but to save time, I took the easy way out and dropped white ink in over about 2 or 3 applications. I also do this around the shrine-like thing on the back to give it the appearance of a backlight. After the white is fully dry, I apply a red ink next, again over 2 or 3 applications. The previous white will help the red to really stand out, and once the red is fully dry, I then add white acrylic paint, this one not an ink, as a dot in the center of all the areas that I just made red. I can then finish off the lights by painting on fluorescent red from Liquitex, which is transparent, again over 2 or 3 applications. I come back with that same silver ink to clean up the areas that I stained white or red before I move into painting the purity seals. The seals I hit with some off-white as a base coat, followed by a stain from using a brown wash, and then a highlight with pure white. I didn't want to use red for the wax due to the red backlighting, so instead I just used the same colors I did for the matte black on the other areas of the tank. As for the skulls, I base coated them with the same off-white and highlighted with the pure white already on my palette, the same I used for the purity seals, and then I tint them with a speed paint to give them a slightly different tone, but nothing too drastically different. I can then finish the skulls with some highlights of that off-white. I added some grease effects from AK Interactive's streaking grime before cleaning it up with a little of the AK Interactive's white spirits, as well as cut out some decals. This was admittedly the first time I ever did decals, and I ruined roughly 5 or so before I started to get the hang of it. In the end, I just put some microset on the front and back of the decal, and a little on the surface I was going to place it. Before I gently slid it just a tiny amount off the paper with my thumb, just enough so I can get a hold of the paper with the tweezers or the tip of a knife as needed. I could then use either end of a brush to help poke and prod it in place before pressing it firmly flat with a clean, damp paper towel, after which I hit it with a little gloss varnish and a few silver scratches. By this time it was roughly 2 a.m. on the morning before the event. Was it time for bed? Nope. It was time to do the most elaborate freehand that I've done to date. Having been on a kick of watching the 90s Addams Family movies recently, I decided that this Lucifer Black Shadowsword was financed by the only family that would not only be able to survive in the grim dark future that is Warhammer 40k, but also thrive. I paint on a fan-made coat of arms that I found on Reddit, complete with their credo. To get the text somewhat centered correctly, I counted the characters for the 3 center words, Gorgiamo Salo Subjectados, including the spaces between them, bringing it to 27 characters. That would be 13 characters to the left and to the right of the second L in the word allos. So I start with the second L dead center, and then I carefully paint each character in space to the right of it, trying to make each one of the characters the same overall width. Then I repeat going backwards, 1 letter at a time to the left. I made sure to double check each next character since it was backwards, as I didn't want to have a typo at this point. With the banner done, the rest was relatively easy as I was just adding some highlights of brighter grays, and with no base rim to black out, I can finally, at 4 AM, call it a night. This is where I stopped. I'll be upfront and honest. I don't think I like painting giant vehicles. This took forever, clocking in at roughly 35 hours. I do like how it came out in the end, and from a direct side view the purple is pretty overwhelming in places, but on a table where you are standing over it, it looks pretty good, and the purple isn't nearly as visible. I should have painted some additional elements, such as some of the small hatches with matte black, to further break up the chrome. But it definitely meets a scheme I aimed for of black on black. This also makes the red fluorescent lights very striking. I know it's not exactly amazing to look at, but I'm pretty proud of the coat of arms, being that freehands are pretty rare for me, and this one was far more elaborate than any that I've done previously. I'm really happy with the spacing of the text on the banner, as that's where I expected to have the most issues. Initially, I felt like I went way overboard with the dings and scratches all over the tank. However, having recently watched the movie Fury, a movie about US tanks in Germany during World War II, there's a scene towards the end where one of the crew is pulled from the tank by Allied soldiers, and the scratches and dings are very similar to what I have, so I managed to Forrest Gump my way into this looking right for an armored vehicle, having received a lot of small arms damage. For lessons learned, if you decide to build a Shadowsword yourself, be warned that assembly steps 11B and 11C are an awful experience. It looks easy, it should be easy, but it was not. At least not for me and a buddy who also built one. Also, consider not permanently attaching the main battery or the fuel canisters on the back until after painting. Had I not glued them on already, it would have made painting a lot easier. Beyond that, each step I took was easy and nothing was remotely difficult for painting and effects. It was just very tedious and time consuming due to the sheer size of the thing. Mercifully, I had a simple color design in mind, so at least I didn't have a ton of paints that I had to keep on my palette. And that'll bring this video to its end. I hope you learned something or inspired to start or expand your own collection of Xenos, Heretic, and mutant slaying machinations from the future Imperium of mankind. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and if you like the content of this video and would like to see more, you can easily support the channel by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. I'm Jim with Working with Miniatures. I'm truly grateful for your time, and I bid you a fond farewell. Until the next video.